On cryptocurrencies, a lot of people following the FTX scandal have really lost faith in them. What is your outlook for cryptocurrencies going forward, and are you still bullish on them?
Yeah, so long term, I'm still very bullish. And again, important to recognize that I'm bullish on Ethereum and Bitcoin. I'm undecided on ones like Solana and Cardano. I do think they'll probably survive, but it's hard to gauge exactly how they do in the longer term. But I do think, for instance, Bitcoin longer term, very, very bullish still. Now, in the near term, though, it's important to recognize that I still see further downside.
Hey guys, welcome back to Library of Wealth. Today we have Gareth Soloway sharing his outlook on Bitcoin, the crypto and stock market, and the US dollar. Soloway says that he maintains a bullish stance on Bitcoin, but predicts further downside coming soon. The current price sits just above 21,700, with Bitcoin potentially heading back to around 18,000 within the next month. Soloway does remain undecided on the longer-term prospects like Solana and Cardano, cautioning against the eagerness of many to jump on the crypto bandwagon. With shady activities in the crypto sector, including the collapse of FTX, Soloway believes that it may actually be a longer-term positive for Bitcoin and the sector as a whole. He suggests that regulation and transparency are crucial for the health of the industry, even if it causes short-term pain. Let's get right to the latest interview with Gareth Soloway as he gives us his crypto market prediction. If you enjoy the content we do here, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let's get right into the video.
So I've been a bear since 69,000. There's bounces along the way. We've seen one of the great bear market rallies here. But what we can see here is you almost have that same M top that formed when we were at the all-time highs. Like if we go back to this chart, look at that same sort of chart pattern, which is exactly what we just created on a very smaller scale. So the question now is, we had a bear flag here. It broke down. And now we're making another bear flag. And my guess is we are headed back to 18,000 and change in the next, probably in the next month or so. So I do think you have downside on it. I still have a lower target. I still don't think Bitcoin has fully bottomed out in this cycle. And I still think that, again, too many people are bullish on Bitcoin and crypto. Like as soon as it pops, a million people come out on Twitter all like, this is the new bull cycle. Bear markets, if you look back at 99 to 2000, when the bull market ended in .coms, or in 2007, when the bear markets followed and finally ended, no one dared be bullish. And that's not happening in crypto yet. People are still too eager to jump on the bull bandwagon. So for me, that's a dead-on signal to be really careful with crypto over the next couple months, as we could see lower lows. I know that sounds super weird that FTX's collapse could be a longer-term positive for Bitcoin, but I think it spurred the onset of regulation that's coming a lot faster. I think if FTX didn't happen, if Celsius didn't happen, if you had nothing going on shady in crypto, then there'd be less push to regulate it, because people, investors in crypto, wouldn't be up in arms that they're losing money left and right. And I think ultimately for the health of cryptocurrency and the sector, you have to have transparency and regulation and all these things. So in a weird way, it's almost like a longer term positive, even though it causes short-term pain.
Can you share your perspective on the US dollar? Because we've seen some wild moves recently.
Yeah, it really has been, right? So especially over the last week, we've seen these big candles to the green side, then the next day, red, green, looks like a Christmas tree almost. But I think the key is we did hit resistance on the dollar here, and it looks to me like the dollar's trying to curl over and come back in. Now, even if we do fall, there's not a lot of downside. 103.60 is going to be some good support. But again, whether it goes up or down near term, the longer, bigger picture remains bearish for me. I think that you're going to look back on this, and we'll all look back on these dollar highs and say that that was a long-term pivot high on the dollar, mainly because I think that, again, as the economy starts to weaken, you're going to see interest rates, long-term interest rates starting to come in just a little bit, short-term as well, and the dollar will weaken as well, assuming that there will be a point in the future where the Fed does have to print again, which is dilutive to the US dollar. So again, for me, we're very close to the end of the rate hike policy cycle. It's just more of an issue that I don't see the Fed lowering rates, at least for the next 6 to 12 months. And I think that's going to be problematic for the economy, but the dollar should start to lower itself based on that.
Soloway notes recent resistance for the US dollar, but predicts a longer-term bearish outlook due to the economy's weakening and the potential lowering of interest rates by the Federal Reserve. Soloway also expresses his concerns about the stock market, predicting a significant downside in 2023 due to investors buying stocks based on memories of past successes rather than considering the market's recovery from last year.
No, as for the general stock market, it seems like we had a rough 2020. Your outlook for that this year, a lot of people are seeing this and saying, this is just the beginning of a major crash in the future.
Yeah, so I am in the camp that I do see significant downside from here. I think that there's these phases when a bull market ends in the preliminary portions of a bear market where investors get very excited because they remember the good times, right? And the good times were Dogecoin and SHIB going up, hundreds of X times, maybe more, and like, AMC and GameStop and all these other ones, right? So you have these interim periods in markets where people say, oh, well, maybe we're going to get back to that. Let's buy everything that was running during that period, and you'll see those little stocks pop, and we have seen that quite a bit. My bigger issue is, even though we've closed above this trend line, right? So this is a trend line that goes all the way from the all-time highs on the S&P, and you have had a bounce off of that. My bigger issue remains that we haven't even retested the pre-COVID highs here. And again, if we look at what's holding this market up, so you have the hope that the Fed pauses, but even if the Fed pauses, they're not going to lower interest rates anytime soon. Powell's made that super clear that he doesn't want to repeat the mistakes of Paul Volcker back in the 80s. So you have long-term interest rates staying probably elevated for a significant amount of time until the economy starts to go into a recession, which is kind of, you could argue that the Fed wants that. I mean, essentially, they've said they want that. So if we go into a recession, you're going to see an earnings recession. And if that happens, then valuations are still way, way too high here. So at some point, I do see another collapse back down. Target for me on the S&P, first target would be this 3380 level. And then eventually, I think you have to go back to this long-term trend line, right? So if we go to the weekly chart, there's this long-term trend line that goes back to the lows in 2009 when we came out of the Great Recession. And that trend line hasn't been tagged in the longest period, right? So if we look at this trend line, there was a little bit of a gap here. This was about 3 years. Then it was about 4 years or so here. And then another kind of dip of about 3 years. And then really just between then and COVID, it was only a year to 2 years. We've now haven't tested this trend line since 2020, right? So we're now getting to the longer end of that. In addition, we were so far above it, it makes me almost feel like we almost need to even go below that. So I won't go to that extent and say, hey, we're definitely going below that long-term trend line. But I think the 3,000 level, it's a round number. It's got to be where we're headed back to.
You're calling for a very prolonged recession, possibly. Can you explain why?
Yeah, so a lot of that has to do with the fact is that we've been kind of addicted to Federal Reserve quantitative easing for a long period of time, right? So the market has not really experienced a recession in basically almost, 15 years. And what that does is it makes the market not know how to deal with a slowdown without Federal Reserve printing. And so my fear is that as we see the economy slow down due to higher interest rates, and we now have the Fed funds rate around 5%, you're going to start to see a recession kicking in probably in the second half of this year. And the kicker is going to be that inflation is unlikely to get back below 2%. It might get close. It may be 3%, 2.5%. But if the Fed won't come out and print right away, how does the economy find its way out of a recession? It doesn't know how to anymore. In fact, you could argue that the Fed has broken the underlying ability for the economy to get out of a recession. So I think that's where I'm looking at it from that kind of vantage point. And I do think that that's the likely scenario here. We're facing, it's not going to be like a depression. I don't foresee that in the next couple of years. It's more like going to be a tough economy that's going to last for years.
Soloway believes that the S&P's first target is 3380 and potentially dropping below 3000. He also predicts a possible recession in the US economy starting in the second half of 2023. He believes it's become too reliant on Federal Reserve quantitative easing and may struggle to handle a slowdown without additional money printing. Despite potential inflation, Soloway clarifies that it would not be a depression, but rather a challenging economy that could last for years. What do you think about Gareth Soloway's prediction for Bitcoin, crypto, and stocks in the next few months? Comment down below. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. This is Library of Wealth. We'll see you in the next video.